Oh man, what a mess. So I'm throwing this video together literally as fast as humanly possible because I want to get it out while it's relevant. That said, with the launch of the Winter Offensive update for Battlefield 6, I wanted to talk about it because this is just a disaster, and stuff like this needs to stop happening, because whether you like it or not, this stuff is hurting the game. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to tell me that I'm overreacting, but I promise you that I'm not. When you introduce updates into a live service video game that make it just worse in several aspects, people are going to start to take notice. Not only are they going to start to take notice, but they're going to start to quit. And that's the last thing that we want. Because despite what a bunch of idiotic gatekeepers may say, the more successful the franchise is, the better things will be for everybody. More resource allocation, better post-launch content, you get the idea. But unfortunately, if this is the track record and this is the trend that we're going to set, then I'm worried about the future. And the biggest reasons that I'm worried is that for all intents and purposes, the Winter Offensive update really wasn't that big of an update. It didn't introduce a whole lot of stuff, and yet it broke a whole lot of stuff. So the question becomes, how the hell does that even happen? Anyways, I wanted to lay out the pros and cons of the update and touch on some things that are just like mind-boggling. Like, how does this stuff happen? First is the idea of unfixing stuff. Because yes, you heard this right, this update unfixed things. If you played yesterday, you may have noticed that when you slide and then jump out of a slide, you would immediately stop and slow down like you were going through molasses. Now, if you've been playing the game for a long time, or more specifically, you played the game when it came out, you would know that this exact issue was present and that they fixed it. Well, newsflash, in the update yesterday, they unfixed this problem, and then in a hotfix today, they refixed the issue. Now, once again, some of you are probably looking at this and you're like, well, Eclipse, they quickly refix the problem, so it's not that big of a deal, right? That's about as dumb of a take as I've ever heard, because if this can unfix itself in an update, then it's setting a precedent for many, many other things to potentially also get unfixed. And unfixing things should never happen. Why is this build that we got lacking fixes from builds that were months ago? That makes no sense. What is the workflow over at DICE right now? And honestly, it's funny because it gives me PTSD flashbacks to when they unfixed the motion sensor bug before the game even went live, something that I've talked about in a previous video. And for the record, in the current state of the game, the motion sensor bug is still not fixed. If you don't know what the motion sensor bug is, if you put down a motion sensor and then die, respawn, it won't spot people anymore. Pretty simple stuff. It shouldn't happen. Before the release of the game, someone made it so that way when you die and respawn, it destroys your motion sensor, and then in a patch note before the game came out, they unfixed the bug by making it so that way your motion sensor would not get destroyed when you respawned without ever actually fixing the issue. So, yeah, that's great. Now, they didn't just unfix bugs, they added a host of new issues and bugs, which a lot of those have nothing to do with the actual update that was added. If you go into the firing range right now, you may notice that if you shoot at targets right to the left or to the right of the target, you'll get hits. I'm shooting nothing and I'm getting hits. Makes sense to me. But if that wasn't bad enough, if you shoot for headshots in the firing range, it does nothing. You can't headshot the firing range targets anymore because, I don't know, because reasons, I guess. What, were they trying to fix the thing where the targets got stuck down, and so when they fixed that, they unfixed everything else? Who knows? Why is it so hard to get the firing range right of all things? It makes no sense. Or how about your hands just turning invisible at the start of the match and then never coming back? Like, how do you break this? This has nothing to do with anything in this update. My second favorite bug of the update, though, definitely has to be the supply pouch bug. This was something that I actually experienced in Battlefield Labs months ago that they thankfully patched for the full release, but it's back. I don't have footage of it on hand, but sometimes when you go to throw a supply pouch to yourself and then you try to shoot, the game will still think that you have the supply pouch equipped. And so if you try to shoot someone, you'll just keep throwing supply pouches at them. Why? Why does this happen? It didn't happen before. Why is it happening now? But the best bug of all, and it's not even close, they broke the main menu? You cannot convince me that anybody tested this. You can't. It's impossible. There's no way they tested this build of the game before they pushed it out. The main menu doesn't work. After you've played a round of any of the game modes in the game right now and go back to the main menu, if you try to pick any option other than the very first one available in each specific dropdown, it just won't let you pick it. It'll gray it out and say, nope, you can't do it. Nope, you can't do it. And what's the fix? The fix is to fully restart the game every time you want to play a different game mode. You can't make this shit up. But honestly, it wasn't just bugs in the update that caused some problems. There was some other things that are just baffling and hilarious to me. Like the fact that they technically fixed the laser designator, but not really. If you saw my video about everything wrong with the aircraft in the game, you'd know that the laser designator right now, you can designate something and then just stop, and it's stuck designated for 20 seconds and there's nothing you can do about it. I also mentioned the fact that once you're designated, there's no indication on how long you're painted for. Well, great news. Now it tells you that you're designated for 20 seconds and tells you while you're painted, but they didn't change that you're still designated for 20 seconds. So one guy can still laser designate the whole map's vehicles in 5 seconds, and they didn't do anything. Why? If you knew that this was a thing, then surely you would have had to have known that you can lock on something and then just forget about it for 20 seconds, but you didn't do shit to change it, so it's still just a better tracer dart? Oh my god. You know what also sucks? Getting killed instantly by a full auto gun in what feels like one bullet. And, well, when it comes to the overall hit registration in Netcode, it genuinely feels like they just backtracked to whatever they had it before Season 1's update that changed the hit registration in Netcode initially. Now, to be fair, I think that they probably did this to try to fix the no-reg issues where you would shoot someone and just do no damage, as these started cropping up the most after that update. That said, going back to getting killed instantly, unreactably, by people who don't even appear to be looking at me on my screen is not fun, and the hit registration stuff is back to being extremely frustrating. Go figure. You want to talk about extremely frustrating? Let's talk about the changes that they did to footsteps, which is the most backwards thing that I've seen in a while, and I really hope we just get a full revert on this, but I'm not holding my breath. DICE in their infinite wisdom decided to make it so that footsteps are just way louder in every capacity. You can hear people from like 20 meters away now if they're running around, which obviously can be a bit of a problem because having louder footsteps heavily encourages defensive and camping playstyles and heavily punishes people for, well, moving around. Basically, if you're running around right now, you're broadcasting your location at all times to anyone in the vicinity. And so then you would probably think, okay, well, this should be good because it'll encourage sneak movement, like crouch running, right? Oh, well, no, they decided to nerf that too in the same update. What? Why? Hilariously, though, they made it so that way footsteps, if they're behind you, are even louder than if you're in front of them, making it so that way meleeing people, something that was already completely unviable and a rare occurrence, is even more unviable in a rare occurrence, because someone's gonna hear your elephant feet from a mile away before you're even close to them, 180 and blast your ass. The problem with footsteps in Battlefield 6 was never that you couldn't hear them because they weren't loud enough. The problem was that half the time they just wouldn't play at all. So the fix to this issue is to make the footsteps reliably actually play, not just make them incredibly loud so they play over every single thing that's going on. Like seriously, if I've got 3 people firing right next to me and I'm shooting my gun, I shouldn't also be able to hear someone sneaking up behind me. That's what noise is for. It's to mask your movement. You shouldn't just be able to hear through it. That doesn't make any sense. I assume all of these changes were made specifically for the dumbass RedSec Battle Royale game mode, making me more and more frustrated at balance decisions seemingly being made for Battle Royale and hurting the multiplayer. I can't say for sure if this is the case, but I keep getting instances like this where I'm assuming that it probably is, and that's not good. But finally, in terms of just absolute garbage that was added with this update and problems, let's talk about the new game mode. This has to be one of the most poorly thought out game modes in a long time. Or maybe it was really well thought out and they wanted it to play out this way. Who knows? in theory, the Ice Lock game mode is really cool. The map is covered in snow, and because of that, if you're away from a heat source for too long, you'll start freezing. It'll make it so that way your health doesn't regenerate, it'll hurt you, make your weapon sway, a bunch of other debuffs. It's pretty cool. The problem is that these effects, most importantly health regen, probably the most important debuff that you get for being frozen, is applied pretty much all of the time. And not only is it applied pretty much all of the time, but there are no medical items in the game that can counteract this. Meaning that if you're not directly standing next to a fire, there is no way to heal yourself, basically ever. You wanna know just how long you have outside of a fire before your health regen shuts off? Well, here you go. Here's the clip of me showing you exactly that. Yeah, I walked like 7 steps and the health regen turns off. Why? I don't know if DICE quite understands just how important being able to regenerate your health is in Battlefield. If you don't have full health, especially in a game like this where you can die almost instantly to a lot of guns that can kill you in as little as 3 bullets, yeah, dying in 2 bullets, for example, or maybe 1 bullet is pretty awful. But the real problem is that this game mode just heavily encourages the most rat bastard scumbag gameplay available, because every real gunfight that you get into has a higher chance of putting you at an immense disadvantage. So the most optimal way to play is to sneak around like a rat and shoot people in the back. That's just the way you play this, because when people are shooting back at you, if you take just 1 or 2 bullets, you either have to run all the way back to a heat source or try to cheese the systems by using fire grenades and the like. And that's the thing, because I actually have had some fun in this game mode, but I assume it was based off of stuff that surely couldn't have been intended. Fortunately, DICE had the foresight to make it so that way fire things, like the incendiary grenade, can be used as a heat source. Unfortunately, you need to be really close to those heat sources, like the fire grenades, and your own fire grenade will light you on fire. However, there is a little window that you can be at where you can heal yourself because of the heat of the fire grenade without lighting yourself on fire. That is assuming it doesn't glitch and light you on fire from way further than it's supposed to, but that's a whole nother problem. Anyways, the point is when you're playing with other people, or you get into these interesting scenarios where, for example, maybe an enemy throws an incendiary grenade at you, but it doesn't hit you, and then you use it as a heat source to heal yourself, those emergent gameplay moments are honestly really cool. It's just that I can't for the life of me assume that that stuff was done on purpose, and I think it's far more likely that this stuff was just hodgepodge together and they were like, well, that sounds like a good idea, we'll just do it, without actually checking if it would be fun to play. Because in fairness, this game mode does a great job of radically changing up the way that the game is played. Knowing where all the heat sources is, or using resources in order to make your own heat source, is pretty interesting. But a lot of that stuff falls apart when you look at it from a more Battlefield lens and start to realize that in this game mode, there's basically one class, and it's the support class. Not surprising, the support class is overpowered as hell anyway, but it's even more overpowered here because it's the only class that gets incendiary grenades. It gets an unlimited supply of those, and it also gets the health items that you can use on the fires to heal yourself. Well, you would be able to use the health items on the fire sources to heal yourself if it wasn't bugged, which it is. Go fucking figure. Yeah, so a lot of the time, if you're already in a health box radius and the freezing debuff is still active, and then you have it removed by fire while still in the radius of the health box, it just doesn't work, and you heal either at the normal rate, or if you get suppressed while it's happening, you don't heal at all. And again, this stuff just screams at me, we didn't check or test any of this stuff. We just chucked this out, hoped it would work, and that was a wrap. Because any competent player would go to a heat source, place down a health pack, and then notice that their health was regenerating slow as ass. It took me like 10 minutes to notice. You're telling me not a single person who tested this noticed? Well, of course not, because they didn't test it. Anyways, Ice Lock was a good idea on paper. I think the execution was pretty horrific, and it's just like, why, guys? Why? Just take like an hour in-house to run a match of these with a couple developers and some bots. Like, come on. And really, half of these issues could have been easily remedied by just making it so that way the health regen doesn't completely stop, and instead, the slowdown of your health regen ramps up over time the longer you're away from a fire until it gets to a point where it does stop. So you know it's at 100% effectiveness while you're totally warm, and then once you start freezing, it goes down to 75, 50, 25, and eventually down to 0. So that way, you can actually play the game when you're not sitting on a heat source. Anyways, I guess not all of the update was bad. Before we wrap up, I can talk about the very few things that I liked here that I think they did a good job with. First is the map, the new reskin for Empire State. Whoever was behind designing this map did an absolutely fantastic job nailing the overall atmosphere of a snowy New York map, and it makes me really excited for when we hopefully sometime soon get an actual winter map in the game, because they've very clearly shown that they're more than capable of doing really pretty winter landscapes, and I love the overall aesthetic. I know a lot of people were complaining and they were like, well, why didn't we get a new map instead of a reskin? To which I would say we literally had the roadmap for this before the game came out. Like, if you had been paying any attention, you already knew this was going to happen. If you went into this update expecting a new map, you just haven't been paying attention. Like, I don't know what else to tell you there. I also have to mention that I appreciate that they've done a pretty quick job at fixing some of the things that they unfixed. So for example, I'm pretty sure I already mentioned that they refixed the slide momentum stuff. They may have unfixed it in this update, but a day later they refixed it, which is good and has a bunch of battle dads and tears. Sorry boys, but yeah, getting stuck in molasses feels like garbage, so I'm glad they decided to fix this. A quick little tangent, as it stands right now, I actually think movement in Battlefield 6 is in a very good place, and I think that fucking with it any further than it's already been, outside of directly fixing potential exploits, is not something that we need to be doing. It's nowhere close to a game like Titanfall or Apex where you've got people flying around the screens, and it already rewards good positioning without directly neutering you for having good movement. I think it strikes a great middle ground, and I hope that they don't fuck with it, and I'm glad that they decided to fix this, as I was worried that they were fucking with it for no reason. And the other great change that came with the update, probably the best one, was a fix to the overall recoil systems of the game that would make it just feel off to use a lot of weapons, and I could already tell things were feeling much better. There was a bug with the recoil before where if you were trying to fight against the recoil, the game would actively work against you the harder that you tried to fight against it, which makes absolutely no sense. And on the same front, if you went with the recoil, the game would basically accelerate your mouse, making it move even further. This at least appears to be fixed with the most recent patch, as you can see on screen now, where I move my mouse the same distance with the cord going left and right, and I end up in roughly the same spot, something that just would not have happened previously. It makes the overall feeling of the game just better, and I really appreciate it. That said, recoil in this game is still a little jank, and I really think that they should remove one of the things that currently exists on it that I don't know why it's there. Basically, recoil in this game has this weird auto-stabilization thing where after you've fired the gun for enough time and it gets to sort of the peak of its recoil, it just stops going. But if you pull down against the recoil, then it kicks in again and starts recoiling again. Anyways, yeah, that's pretty much all of the things that I wanted to talk about. I mainly put this out here because I just want there to be more voices talking about the fact that unfixing bugs and adding a bunch more, making the game just in a worse state than before you applied an update, is something that they really have to start nailing down. I don't think Battlefield 6 is in a horrible spot. I know there's a lot of people freaking out about player numbers dropping or whatever, which is just sort of inevitable when it comes to a lot of these live service games. Of course, player counts are going to fall, and it was a miracle itself that Battlefield took off as much as it did this year. That said, they're going to lose more and more players if they put out shoddily tested bad updates that make the game worse to play. If you have to restart your game every time you want to pick a different game mode, at some point you're probably just going to not play the game and just pick something else to play. And that sucks. We don't want people just leaving because the game doesn't work. I'm sure DICE won't see this video, so whatever, but this stuff's got to get nailed down. Anyways, with that, I'm done. So if you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like and subscribe. If you didn't, don't. And with all that being said, have a wonderful day night wherever you are, and I'll see you guys next time.